Again, welcome to tonight's training. My name is Deidre Driscoll. I am a Silver IBO with Evolution Enterprises. I'm also an IATAN accredited agent. And tonight we are going to be training on the Law of Intentionality. Now, I want to give you just a little background because I know you hear me on our calls and everyone calls me techie. But by profession, I am an organizational management specialist. I am a certified leadership trainer with the John Maxwell team. So I'm going to take just an excerpt from one of my trainings that I do. It's going to come from his book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. So I encourage you, if you're looking for a professional development tool, you want a book to read, something to help you transition and take your business to a new level, I highly recommend this book by John C. Maxwell. He is the leadership guru and he always has very practical training. So we're going to talk about just one of them tonight, the Law of Intentionality. So I want to start by asking you a question, and I want you to think about your answer. And if you want to put it in the chat box, that is fine. But do you have a plan to grow? Pretty simple question. But do you actually have a plan to grow? And I'm saying that because sometimes we just assume that it's going to happen, but growth is not natural in the sense that we're referring to. Now, if you live and you eat, physically you will grow, but when it comes to your professional and personal development, growth is not automatic. It's not natural. You have to tangibly do something in order to create growth in your life. Now, many of you may be at those ages where you perhaps have gone to a class reunion, and maybe you've seen some of your classmates and you kind of look at them and some of them are doing really well, some of them maybe not so well, and you kind of think, well, what happened? Perhaps it was that they didn't necessarily have a plan to succeed. Some of the people who were popular and whatever they were back in high school, you see them at the reunion and tables have turned and maybe they're not what they used to be or what you thought they were going to be. Often it's because they did not have a plan. They weren't intentional about their success. So what we're going to talk about tonight is ways to help you plan to grow so that you can be intentional about your success, not just in your personal life, but especially in your professional life as well. So I asked that question, do you have a plan to grow? So we're going to look at 8 growth gaps that happen in life. And we're going to try and pinpoint where we are. And I'm saying we because even though I'm sharing information, I'm applying it to myself as well. And I want you to be interactive. I want you to feel free to utilize that chat box because as we're talking about these growth gaps, I want you to figure out where you fall in so that you can then go on to the next level after that. So the first growth gap we're going to look at is the assumption gap. The assumption gap. Now, some people fall into the assumption gap because they just assume I will automatically grow. If I just do it long enough, I'm going to automatically grow. If I keep my business active, I'm automatically going to grow and be more successful just because I'm in business. I've been in business for a certain number of years. We all know some businesses that may have fallen by the wayside because they didn't grow and adapt as things changed. Now, I'm not going to totally date myself, but I am because I remember as a kid when it was coming down time for Christmas, there used to be a department store called Montgomery Ward's. And they had this big giant catalog that had all the toys we could imagine. And we couldn't wait to see that catalog because they were just the epitome of where we were dog-earing pages and circling things about what we wanted for Christmas. But if you realize now, that store no longer exists. They did not automatically adapt and grow as times changed. And although people are still ordering things, Montgomery Ward's is no longer around. That's just an example. Thank you, Lisa. I was starting to feel like I was the only person of a certain age who could remember that store. But again, you can't assume that you will automatically grow. The next growth gap is the knowledge gap. Some people get stuck because they don't know how to grow. I don't know what to do in order to be better in my business. Now, when you are a part of Evolution Enterprises, tools are not a problem just because there's so many different ways that you can get knowledge. We've now branched out there, even lives on social media. You've got the vendor training. You've got trainings like this that teams do. So there's not a real good reason for the knowledge gap to hang you up, but sometimes you miss out on the knowledge because you're not applying yourself or making yourself available to it when it's being disseminated. So we're talking about being intentional and avoiding some of these growth gaps, such as the knowledge gap. If you know that you are having trouble in a particular area, say something. If you don't know where the training exists, ask someone. Let someone help direct you to where the training you need happens to be, because it's available. Our third growth gap we're going to look at is the timing gap. The timing gap means it's not the right time to grow. That's what some people think. Or you think, I've got time, I'll do it later. One thing that this season in our life, this especially with what happened with the pandemic, it shook people to their core and they had to reevaluate time. There were people who unfortunately did not make it as a result of what happened, who were young people, people who were thriving in their lives and their businesses, and no one expected that one day they would be here and the next day they wouldn't. So you want to make sure that you don't get hung up in the timing gap where you think it's not the right time to grow. So let me let you in on a secret. It's always the right time to grow. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write that down for the timing gap. It's always the right time to grow. Now in nature, there are seasons where things are actively growing and then they're resting. But in real life, in business life, in professional life, we should always strive to be growing and not fall into the timing gap of thinking, oh, it's not the right time to grow. Right now is the optimal time to grow your business. A lot of people gave up on their travel businesses during the pandemic because travel was halted. They didn't think that it was still time to grow your business, that you could start looking toward 2021 bookings. Look at it as a time to grow in training. But people often fall into timing gap. The next gap that people fall into is called the mistake gap. The mistake gap is where I'm afraid of making a mistake, so I don't do anything. I'm paralyzed because I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake, so I don't want to do the wrong thing, so I'm going to just choose to do nothing. Have any of you ever been there where you were afraid that you might do it wrong, so you didn't do anything at all? That is one of the growth gaps that stunt our growth. And because we're talking about intentionality, we're talking about doing it on purpose, setting a direct plan to grow, to prosper, to know more, to expand. You want to make sure that you get a hold of fear. We're going to talk a little bit more about fear later in tonight's presentation, but the mistake gap is often what stops people because they're afraid, well, I'm not going to advertise my business because what if someone asks me to book their trip and I make a mistake on the trip? I don't want to do that. But guess what? If you are a travel agent, booking trips is what you do. And so you book the trip. If you make a mistake, it's okay. We've all done it. We've all made mistakes. But you then have to understand what your tools are and be able to recover from it. Know that you've got Archer Travel backing you. You've got errors and omissions insurance, because sometimes we make errors and or omissions. So don't be afraid to book a group cruise, or don't be afraid to tell people that you have a CBD store. I'm going to touch on that too, because what if I don't know what to say to someone? I just got started, and so I don't really know yet. I haven't even received my product yet, so I don't want to tell anyone about my business because I'm afraid. Don't let the mistake gap prevent you from growing, because growth is required. You've got to be intentional about it, and you want to make sure that you take advantage of every opportunity and don't allow fear to prevent you from stepping into your destiny and the next level of your life and your business. So we've gone through 4 growth gaps. We've got some more we're going to touch on. I just want to make sure that this is being valuable for you. Have you located yourself in any of the first 4 gaps? Because I've got 4 more we're going to talk about. So in your plan for growth, these are some of the things you want to steer clear of. The next one is the perfection gap. Now, I'll be honest and transparent. This is one that I battle with because I'm a perfectionist. And the perfection gap says I have to find the best way before I start. I want all the information, all the possible ways it could be done, and then think about it and then think about it some more. So I kind of get into that analysis thing in my head sometimes. So for growth, I have to push past that need to be perfect on everything. So the perfection gap means, I want to make sure that it's top notch and top flight. Now, let me give my balance to that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be excellent. I'm simply saying that don't let your striving for perfection prevent you from growing. Because when you get ready to do that next step, you might not be perfect at it on the first go round. You can perfect it as you go, but you gotta go. I was having a conversation with someone and I was sharing something with them and I said, you cannot direct a parked car. You've got to be in motion in order to receive direction. So if you are stalled out and sitting on the sideline of your life or your business, trying to be perfect before you get started, you're going to miss out on a lot of things that are intended for you. So we're talking about the law of intentionality. And what that means is you've got to make specific decisions and be intentional about growing and perfecting and being better in your business. But you can't allow the perfection gap to stall you out and prevent you from growing. I hope this is helping some of you. Our next gap is the inspiration gap. I don't feel like growing. Deidre, you don't understand. I am stressed out. School's back in, and now I got these kids I got to homeschool. I don't like school when I was in school, and now I got to be the school. I have no inspiration right now. Right now, all I can do is make sure that, they get and that the internet don't go down. That's this. I'm tech services. I'm a teacher. I'm a counselor. I'm the lunch lady. I can't. I have no inspiration. If that's you, then you've got to realize it first of all and be honest with yourself, and then determine what you need to do to push past it. Because if you allow yourself to continuously be uninspired, you are creating suicide in your business, suicide in your personal growth, and you don't want to allow yourself to stay there too long. We all have moments where we don't feel inspiration, but we can't allow it to become a whole season or a new way of life. Another way of looking at that is that's the slippery road to depression. So we want to make sure that you allow yourself to intentionally be inspired. Now, for me, I love music, and music inspires me. So sometimes when I have those slumps and moments, I have to go and select certain kinds of music and play it for myself, kind of get in a moment with it so that it helps jerk me out of that place. I don't know what it is for you that pulls you back into inspiration, what inspires you, but you need to identify what that thing is or what trigger you can pull to slingshot yourself out of one of those slumps if you happen to be in one. It may be, like I said, turn up the music loud and dance in the house, and go in the kitchen, go in the laundry room, go in the basement, go outside and scream for a moment, dance, whatever it is that's going to spark something in you. Go back and remember why you started doing the things that you're doing. Remind yourself of what those goals were. If you have a vision board, or if you've put together those things in the past about why you're doing what you're doing, allow those kinds of things even to help you rekindle your inspiration. It's okay. I know that while people were cooped up and confined and quarantined, All sorts of strange things ran through their mind. A lot of people gave up on the dreams and goals and purposes that the Lord had given them or that they were following because they lacked inspiration. So when we're talking about being intentional, every day you have to remind yourself and stir up your own self. A good book I love tells you to stir yourself up, but sometimes you have to be your own cheerleader. If you don't have a circle that you're accountable to that will help cheer you on and pull you out of that funk, if you get into it, then you have to inspire yourself sometimes. You cannot allow yourself to say, I don't feel like growing. You have no choice. Because if you stop growing, you're going to wither up and die. So we want to be sure that you're paying attention to your inspiration. Some people are naturally more bubbly than others, so it doesn't matter if you're the cheerleader type or not. Even if you're not the cheerleader type, you still have to inspire yourself and find out what it is that brings you inspiration and take that thing and put it before you when you feel yourself slipping into this area where you say, I don't feel like growing. I hope this is helping you. Our next growth gap is the comparison gap. This one is easy to do when you're in a situation where you're got thousands of other people in a group doing the same thing that you're doing because you may think others are better than I am. Or you're comparing yourself to your leader, or you're comparing yourself to another family. You're comparing yourself to someone else who's doing what you're doing or what you'd like to do, and you get stagnant because you don't feel that you're measuring up. So let me help you with that one. The comparison gap is self-inflicted. Contrary to what you're thinking, that other person that you're comparing yourself to, they're battling all of these same things as well. So whether they are a gold consultant or a platinum or a double platinum or a 20-star platinum, or they're epic, or they're balancing all 3 businesses or 2 businesses, or they're doing one and they're IATAN holder, and you're sitting there looking at yourself and trying to compare yourself to them, that gap can stunt your growth if you stay there too long. Now, you can allow someone else's success to inspire you, but don't allow it to expire you. When you're in that comparison situation where you're thinking, oh, how are they doing this? They're doing better than I am. They're booking more than I am. They're selling more than I am. They're able to put a post up and get 100 people to respond. I put a post up in crickets. Don't allow that comparison gap to stall you out in business. Don't allow it to stall you out personally, because the law of intentionality says that you have to have a specific plan. So whatever your plan is, you just keep working it until it gets you to where you're going. Don't allow the comparison gap to cause you to be discouraged and say, you know what, forget it. I tried that. I've been in business for 30 whole days and I have not made $10,000. So I'm ready to just say, forget it, because someone else, they did it in 30 days. Well, you don't really know what their story is. You may think that it was just 30 days, but they may have been trying in business for the last 20 years. So you just saw the last 15 minutes of their story. Don't allow the comparison gap to cause you to feel that others are better than you. Now, the last growth gap we're going to look at before we move on is the expectation gap. This one is really tough. This catches a lot of people when you do something new and you step out into uncharted waters. The expectation gap can grab you because I thought it would be easier than this. I thought it would be easier. So the expectation gap is going to create that place where you're stagnant and you're thinking, how hard could this be? The only reason I opened up this business is because I thought it was going to be easy. So I don't know who told you that starting a business would be easy, because that is not true, but it is worth it. The fact that you have to work at it means that it's going to be rewarding. Some things are easier for some people than others, depending on your background. But if you find out that you had the false expectation, you thought that all I would have to do is do one post and then I was going to get a booking for $50,000 and I would be set for the year, and that didn't happen, then you can't give up on your business over that. Don't allow the expectation gap or the thought that it would be easier to do what you're trying to do than it's been for you to stop you from growing. Doesn't matter if it's not easy. As long as you're still growing, you can break through to the place that you want to go. I want you to think about if you've ever seen cracks in a sidewalk and you see some type of weed or plant or something growing up through those cracks. Can you imagine the road that it went through in the soil underneath where the concrete was poured, and it had to grow and perhaps grow sideways until it found a little opening and then grow up a little more in order to break through one of those cracks? Sometimes business is like that. We have to work through some cracks and we've got to push through some hard things, but that doesn't mean that we're not still growing and that we're not going to reach where we intended to reach. But we can't allow our expectations to cause us to give up and say, forget it. Now we're talking about the law of intentionality, and the law of intentionality is saying that I've got to make a plan. I've got to have a specific reason and focus and push and direction to reach the goals that I've set for myself. So how do I grow? I've got to have a plan. Now, we want to look here and says, okay, if you feel like you're losing, everything is going to hurt. And I don't think I want to keep going because it's hurting. But the question is why? When things are happening and they're uncomfortable, or you feel like I'm not doing as well as I thought I would have done, and it's hurting, I'm making sacrifices to keep my business open, I'm doing all these extra things, and it should have happened by now. Here's a quote from John, and he says, you know what? If we consider the fact that Rome wasn't built in a day, how long are you willing to give yourself? I know you've heard the first part of that before, that Rome wasn't built in a day, but think about it. Your business, your empire, your legacy, it's not going to be built in a day. So the question you're going to have to ask yourself is, how long are you willing to give yourself to succeed? Did you decide that I have to be successful in 30 days or it's quits? Or I have to be successful, or I have to reach this goal in 90 days, or I'm throwing in the towel? Or maybe I need a year. Maybe I'm willing to give it 2 years. Maybe I'm willing to give it 5 years. I don't know. It depends on your dreams and your goals and what you're trying to achieve. This often comes into play, like when people who are exercising and trying to lose weight, or training for a marathon, or any of these kinds of things. How long are you willing to give yourself? And you need to be willing to do that. Right, Mona, I see you, and Suzanne, you should be willing to do it as long as it takes. But that's not the first thought that most people have. How long are you willing to give yourself to reach that? Now I'm going to throw a parallel in here that perhaps you hadn't thought of. And this is something as entrepreneurs that we get part of it, but maybe we've not looked at it this way. If you had a job or have a job, or you entered the workforce, you were following a traditional path. You know, you graduated from high school or got your GED, and then you entered the workforce. Our society says that we should be willing to work for at least 40 years, and now it's actually longer than that for some, and work hard as you can for 40 years, give everything to the company. Now, perhaps our parents' generations and generations before us worked for one company for that long. Now people are, changing companies and taking things from place to place. But nevertheless, the idea is that you're going to work for 40 years in order to reach the golden point of retirement. We don't argue with that, until you got this entrepreneur bug, then you did. But initially, when you just signed up for a job, you were willing to work however long they told you needed to work until you could retire, because that was just how it is. But when it comes to having your own business or setting yourself up in an entrepreneurial situation and creating and changing the course of your life, we want to give up real fast. You did not go into HR on your second day on the job and say, wait a minute, I don't want to work for another 40 years. I think that you should qualify me for retirement after my 90 days are over. That sounds crazy when we say it that way. But the question is, how long are you willing to give yourself in order to be successful, in order to grow in whatever area it is? If you're trying to lose weight, then it took you more than 30 days to put however many pounds on. So it's a little unrealistic to think that you could shed all of that weight in 30 days. There's no magic pill or drink or shake or meal plan or exercise regimen you could do to take all of that off healthy in 30 days. But the same issue is with your business. You are building a new legacy and you've got to give it time. You're unlearning some bad habits, you're learning some new ones, you're perhaps getting a new skill set, and you've got to give yourself time in order to be successful. So if you're trying to look at the law of intentionality, the answer that those ladies threw in the chat box earlier, as long as it takes, that's the intention you have to set before you. So now, let's look at some questions real quick. As we transition to intentional growth, there's your picture. They're out there in Rome. I want you to keep that in mind because it was not built in a day. But if you notice, it's still was built strong and fortified and intentionally. Even now, all these thousands of years later, it's still standing. So let's ask some big questions. The law of intentionality says, do you have a plan to grow? So here are some questions that you should ask yourself. The first one, where do you want to go in life? Where do you want to go? You need a destination. Otherwise, you're just driving around. And it's the same thing in your business. Where do you want to go in life? What do you want out of your business? I used the term successful earlier in our training, but successful is relative. What you define as success and what the next person defines as success may not be the same thing. And you won't know if you're successful if you haven't identified what success means to you. So your first question is, where do you want to go in life? Or in your business, or in your family, or personally? You want to lose weight. How much weight do you want to lose? Do you want to fit into a certain size clothing? Do you want to lose a certain numerical amount of pounds? Do you want to stop taking medication? You need to define it. Where do you want, or what do you want? The next question is, what direction do you want to go? How are we going to go about achieving that goal? Whatever it is that you want, how are you going to achieve it? You opened up a business because you saw having an additional stream of income as something that could help you reach whatever particular financial goals or things that you have. Keep that in mind and keep that direction in mind. What's the farthest you can imagine going? Now, this one is really powerful. And it seems simple, but I really want you to think about what this is asking you. What is the farthest you can imagine going? Because if you cannot imagine a particular level of success, you're not going to reach it. Now, in a company like ours where you have tiered levels, for you, it may start with you imagining transitioning from consultant to executive, or executive to bronze, or bronze to silver, or silver to gold, gold to platinum, platinum to 1-star. Because for some of us, and I'm not asking you to put this in the chat box unless you want to, but for some of us, it just sounds good to be platinum or above. but you really can't imagine yourself having a team of 300 people. You are struggling with your bronze team. And so you can't fathom having 300 people when you were at executive with 3 people and it was really working your nerves. So you have to determine how far you see yourself being able to go. So I want you to write down on your notes. Like I said, you don't have to necessarily put it in the chat box unless you just want to, but realistically, where do you see yourself going in the company? And it's okay if your answer isn't 8-star platinum today, but that can be a changing goal later on. It could be something that you then have to work on, seeing yourself with a bigger team. If you can't see yourself being successful or reaching whatever place in the compensation plan, then you're never going to get there. If you cannot imagine yourself as whatever, you're not going to reach that. So you've got to understand going in, as of today, what is the farthest I can imagine? And then if it needs to be moved to a different point later, then you know what you have to do to stretch that. Perhaps you need to be around someone who's on that level or who's doing that thing that you imagine yourself doing. Shadow them and just watch them. You can do this on social media. So it doesn't mean that you have to get on a plane and go physically to where they are, but start watching what people do that are on the level you want to get on, so that you can envision yourself. They've got these little apps now where you can put your face over someone else's face in a video. So maybe that's what you have to do in your mind, is see yourself on that platinum poster announcement. Do what you need to do in order to stretch your mind, because if you can't see it, you can't achieve it. If you can't imagine it and dream about the level of success you're just talking about, you are not in danger of reaching it ever. So let's free yourself, take the pressure off. If you can't really see it, you're not going to achieve it, and you don't have to worry about it. Next one, how long will it take? Now, earlier we said we were going to take as long as it takes, but then just be realistic about certain things. If it's a training issue, then how long does it take for me to complete training? Do I need to go back to college and get additional courses towards something? If you want a degree and you've only completed a certain number of years, how much more do you need in order to obtain your degree? Or is there something else that you need, and you need to know quantitatively how long it will take, so that you can free yourself from thinking it'll happen overnight, because it's not going to happen overnight. Big questions. So I want to make sure that you jot those questions down so that you can answer them, because we're talking about the law of intentionality. And if you are intentional about your growth and intentional about your success, these are the questions you need to answer so that you can chart your direction to get to it. So here you go. Do it now. No, really, do it now. Seriously, what are you waiting for? Because it's great to have training every week and have notebooks full of notes and all sorts of links to YouTube videos and inspirational videos, but none of them mean anything in your growth plan until you put them into action. So whatever you wrote down, you need to start setting your course, because remember when I mentioned you cannot direct a parked car? You've got to start rolling and moving in the direction of your success in order for you to achieve it. So whatever your goals may be, you've got to be intentional about it, and you can't keep putting it off until tomorrow. Because I want you, if you have a device, or perhaps you're old school and you got a paper calendar, I want you to look on that calendar. I want you to see the days of the week and the numbers of the days of the month and the months of the year. Tomorrow is not written anywhere on your calendar. So if you keep putting something off, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, there is no such time. If you keep saying, oh, I'll get around to it, there's no such time on your calendar for that. You've got to be specific and intentional as to when you're going to do what you need to do, how you're going to put it into action, and then hold yourself accountable by doing it. We have those long range goals, but long range and long term goals are never achieved until you break it up into short term pieces that you can achieve. That's how you know you're moving closer to the goal. If I were to ask how many of you want to be a millionaire, I'm sure that I will have lots of people in the chat box that would sign up and say, yes, I want to be a millionaire. But guess what? If you don't have plans to be a hundredaire or a thousandaire or a 10,000aire or a 100,000aire, I know those aren't real things, but I think you catch what I'm saying. You can't just go from zero to millionaire without making a plan and doing something about it every day. Start multiplying your money now and it can reach $1 million. But the reality is you've got to be intentional about how you're going to achieve the things you want to achieve. We cheer one another on and we're like, yes, we're all going to be epic. We're going to be in the millionaire club. We're going to be 5, 6, 7, 8-figure earners. Absolutely. But you've got to have a plan as to how you're going to get there. So when do you start the plan? You start the plan now. Do it now. So maybe you need to write that for yourself. Do it now. So I've mentioned earlier we were going to touch on fear. So we're going to round this out and hit the fear factor, because fear is one of the main things that is going to keep you from reaching the goals that you are planning and achieving the growth and levels of success that you want in your life. So we're going to talk about fear for a moment. Now, depending upon what your background is, some people refer to fear as false evidence appearing real and all sorts of other things. But whatever you want to call fear, you've got to face it. You've got to face your fears. So here are some common fears that people have and that they allow to prevent them from being intentional about their growth. The number one is the fear of failure. What if I fail? I don't want to put it out there that I've got a business, because if my business isn't successful, then everyone's going to know that I failed. The fear of failure. So you want to realize that it takes the exact same amount of energy to be afraid as it does to believe. I'm going to repeat that, because it's going to take the same amount of energy to fear as it is to believe. So while you're sitting there thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong, if you took that exact same energy and flipped it and think about all the things that could go right. What if I succeed? What if I'm the first person in my family to successfully run a business? What if I'm the first person to become debt free? What if I take that same what if that you're investing in the possibility of failing and flip it and allow it to become a motivating factor? Because it's going to take the same amount of energy either way. The next one is a fear of trading security for the unknown. Some people are afraid to step out in faith or step out in a venture because if I've got this good job and I've got these great benefits and I've had this job for so many years, and I don't want to step out and start a business because I don't know what's going to happen. At least on my job, whether I like it or not, they pay me every Friday or every, other week or whatever that is. But if I try to step out on my own, what if I don't have that security blanket anymore? You're right, Gary, there is no such thing as a good job now. But right now, people are afraid and have been afraid sometimes of trading that security for the unknown. You are an entrepreneur. That means you walk on water. That means you tread and live and thrive in the unknown. You are out there believing God or whoever you believe in or whatever you believe in, that you're going to be successful by doing it a different way. So as an entrepreneur, you can't allow the fear of trading your security for the unknown to cause you to backtrack on your business. The next fear is the fear of being overextended on your resources. I'm afraid that if I keep my business open, I won't have money to do XYZ. So I'm not going to pay the $69.95 because I've got to. Well, what if you didn't pay the $69.95 and that trip you booked, that really great one that has a nice commission due, the commission pops up while you're red and you don't get paid? You can't allow the fear of being overextended on your resources to prevent you from stepping out in business and doing what you need to do. Now, I'm not saying for you to be irresponsible as far as your money goes, but some people are so afraid of their, I've got this nest egg, or if I dip into this, or I don't want to. You've got to keep your doors open in your business no matter what. What if the person who was going to be that cash cow client comes and wants to, book something with you, or they were planning to do a big order of CBD from your business, or they were coming and they were going to bring with them all sorts of people. But when they called you and asked you about your business, all you could say was, well, right now, some things that happen and I'm not active right now, blah, 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 blah. You've already set things in motion. For those of you that are people of faith, I know that you've already called in a harvest and you don't want it to show up and you not be ready or the lights be out. For me, one of the challenges with the post-pandemic thing is there are businesses that I want to patronize that are no longer open. And it's tough because I was counting on getting something from this place or going to that, and those businesses closed their doors as a result of what happened during the pandemic. So you don't want to let the fear of being overextended on your resources prevent you from doing what you need to do to grow. You've got to invest in yourself in order to get a return. I joke because I have some people in my life that play, they play the Powerball, or what are those things? And we talk about on the billboard when it says, oh, it's going to be however many million tonight. And I tell them I am in no danger of winning that because I didn't buy a ticket. It's the same thing with your business. If you don't invest in your business because you're afraid, you are never going to hit the jackpot in your business because you didn't participate. The next fear is the fear of what others are going to think. I don't want to tell everyone about my business, or right now I'm going to be quiet about my business because of the pandemic, or we don't know what's going to happen next with the election or the economy or the this or that. And I don't know. I don't want them to think that I made a bad decision. Who cares what anyone else thinks? Because they are obviously not supporting your situation anyway, because if they were, then, what they thought might matter. But most of the time when we are afraid of others, quote unquote, others, they are people who don't matter. So you can't allow the what ifs and the people who have something to say, because guess what? When you're successful, they're going to have something to say as well. Oh, he thinks he's something now that he got a business. So again, you can't please them. So don't worry about them. Don't let fear set in over what are they going to think? What kind of business is that she's in? Why she, he, what? Don't allow that fear to set in. Then the last fear is the fear of pushing others away. Sometimes you have to realize that as you're going from one level to another level, everyone is not going to go with you. Everyone is not going to cheer you on and be on your team and celebrate your success. So for some of them, it's not that you're actually pushing them away, it's that they can't ascend to the new altitudes that you're going to. They don't have the capacity. So sometimes when you make a decision to grow and you're surrounded by people who have made a decision not to grow, you've got to be bold enough to be willing to push past that and realize that if they can't see it, or they don't believe it, or they don't support it, they're going to be okay, but I got to move on. Keep that why in mind. I've got a legacy to create. I've got goals to reach. I've got things that I need to do, and I can't be afraid of what they are thinking or that they're going to be. Because guess what? Some people are going to be turned off by your success anyway, and they're going to push themselves away without you having to do a thing. So now, as we wrap up, I want you to ask yourself, which emotion is stronger? The desire to change and grow, or one of these 5 fears? Do you want to grow more than you're afraid of failing? Do you want to change more than you're afraid of trading your security for the unknown? Do you want it bad enough that you're not going to be afraid of being overextended on your resources? Are you going to go after it so that you don't even care what other people think? Are you going to go after growth and change and be intentional and not be afraid of who doesn't come along with you? Or are you going to let one of these fears stop you from reaching those things that you were jotting down earlier in tonight's training? The law of intentionality requires you to be bold. You have to be a little bit cocky about certain things. You've got to believe that the plan, the purpose, the pursuit that you're following is more important than any of these other things. The possibility of your success, you seeing yourself on the other side of growth. If you're a seed and you can't see yourself as the oak tree, then you might have a challenge. You've got to consider that if I'm just a seed right now, every seed produces something that is exponentially greater than it is in size. If where you are right now is just in the seed stage, you've got to start seeing yourself as that finished product. Whatever it is, whatever area of your life that you need to grow in, you need to know it's not going to happen automatically, and growth is not naturally going to occur unless you intentionally do something about it. So my challenge to you tonight, team, is to be intentional. Ask yourself those questions. Make a decision about the issue and the subject of fear, because it's going to take the same amount of energy to fear as it is to believe. So you might as well believe and do what you need to do to go through the process of growth. See yourself as that finished product. And if you can't see yourself as the finished product yet, if you're a seed, see yourself as that first bud. See yourself as the flower. See yourself as the tree. See yourself as the fruit. Do it in a progression, but do it, because you cannot move a parked vehicle. You can't direct it. You have to be in motion in order to obtain all of these things and to grow. So I leave with you the thought of being intentional tonight. Do you have a plan to grow? I sincerely hope that you do. And if you didn't before the call, then you have an assignment to do it now. Make your plan. What is going to happen now differently than before you got on this call that's going to propel you to your place of success? My name is Deidre Driscoll, and I am a Silver IBO with Evolution Enterprises, and this has been our training tonight. So I thank you for allowing me to share some great information with you, and I trust that the law of intentionality is going to help propel you to where you want to go, because I know you've got great dreams. Now you just need to attach to it, plan to achieve them. Thank you.